Yeah, and we're back. The fitness podcast, it'll be episode 23. We're still going, thank God. And now we're actually getting to the point of being a lot more, organized and branching out. Instead of me talking to M and K-Mac each week, we're going to also include in some guests, just because we're all boring each other at the moment in time. So we want to bring on some new fresh blood into the game. So this week, as our first guest, we've actually got Kev, a good friend of mine. We're just going to shoot the shit about some various different things, and he's got some very good insights into business, training, and current philosophies that he's utilizing towards his business and his training as well. So, hey Kev, how's it going?
Good, mate. Thank you very much for having me on in the first place, and also for having me on as your first guest. Cannot promise to not bore you though. I don't know if obviously you're branching out off the back of that, but yeah, you've. Thanks very much for having me on, mate.
No, it's all right. So it'd be the first and last of your shit. So,
yeah, well, we'll just go with that just now, mate. That's definitely guaranteed.
Yeah, that's fine. So with the fitness podcast, we don't really have like a niche. We are just basically the fitness podcast for a reason. So just tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing, where you currently are, and how long you've been doing this little stint of recomp for, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sweet. So yeah, I'm one for waffling on, so I'll try and keep this as short as I can, so we can get into some of the good topics. But basically, long and short of it is, I've been in the industry from when I was 19, so I think we're going on the best part of 12 years now, which is show my age. Most of that has been spent on the gym floor, doing the standard 6 o'clock rises, 10 o'clock finishes, all the fun stuff that people like to bitch about in the industry now. But if I'm honest, I liked it. I wore it as a badge of honor to start with, and it allowed me to hone my craft as somebody who helps people get in shape. So done that for the best part of 10 years, and then had a bit of a transition to online. That was mostly sparked from the one-to-one going really, really well, to the point where I built a team on the gym floor. And then that got kind of taken away from me, so to speak, because basically you're not allowed to build a business within a business. So I worked within just a budget chain. So I went back to being, one-man bands, but actually caught the bug of running a business, so to speak, and having other coaches work with me. Then made the transition to online. So kind of debated whether to look at opening up a gym or not, or do the online model. And I decided on the online model because I've wanted to travel for a long time. Finally starting to do that. COVID, is definitely making a bit of a restriction to it, but it's allowing for some. So then went to the online side of things. Actually, then worked with yourself under another company, which was great at the time. Loved working with you, but again, it came back to the fact that I was working for somebody else and not under my own wing, so to speak. So branched out, started my own the online side of Recomp, and started that in kind of March going into May of 2020, and now we are a team of 3 coaches in March 2021, and yeah, the growth has been pretty pretty staggering, to be honest. It still kind of takes me back a little bit, but now we're growing to something that's a lot bigger than what I expected when I was in the spare room with a laptop building this last year. So yeah, long and short of it, we're still in the same field, still helping people get in shape, but it's not just me anymore.
That's fine. When you wake up in the morning, what drives you?
I think this is quite a good topic. We've been going back and forth on this, because when I first started PT, it was purely like, let's get good at this craft. Like, I've got something that excites me. I like helping people. I'm doing it. I'm quite a social guy, so I'm doing it in a format that I'm face to face with somebody. I just enjoy the day job of it. Plus, actually, when you get they're feeling best, or that they're fucking with the light on, or they're in their closet they've not been in for 10 years, or like just the small little snippets that, you know, give you job satisfaction. Those little things kept that reward. So that was a feedback loop. As with anything, these kind of things die down, and you can't really take the highs with the lows, so to speak. You have to have a little bit more of a just like general purpose for getting up. So then when I first started Recomp, like being completely transparent with it, the incentive to get up in the morning was the fact that the gyms were closed and I had zero money coming in. So I had to actually like make the online a success to be able to feed myself. And then, you know, that went to the point where feeding myself was no longer an issue. You know, getting the general bills was no longer an issue. Getting to the position where we're doing a little bit better for ourselves, better than expected. So therefore, that getting up in the morning to tick that box was no longer there. And now actually I'm setting goals for the company and both myself that are out with what I expected. So that it just feels different. It doesn't feel like the same, like get up in the morning because you have to feed yourself, or, you know, feed the kids, keep the lights on, that kind of general mentality. And then also it's not just about trying to do it for pure job satisfaction from like getting these little nice messages that you know yourself, you get them on a weekly basis because you are changing people's lives. And that in and of itself is a fulfillment part. But actually now there's a few different things. Like there's small things like I want to make sure Jade and James, my coaches, they've got that position where they now feel at their most stable, where they can start thinking of what they want from life outside of just keeping bills paid. But purely from a company point of view, I think it's actually just a case of like progress is it's infectious. You know, I want to see how far we can take it, how big we can build this, and how many lives we can actually impact. So that's a bit of a cheesy one, but it's something that we've said that we've both not got figured out, but I'm very much aware that it feels different from that hustle stage where you're at the very, very start and you just have to get up and work for the sake of it. But now in a much more comfortable position, it's like, right, why are we setting goals? Why are we still driving for progress when we're comfortable? And I don't have a clear answer to it, but there's definitely still a desire to get up in the morning and get stuff done, you know?
Yeah, I think we spoke about it before, but there is definitely the two elements of when people are in two phases of their life from a I don't know, purpose standpoint. One is where you're running away from something as fast as you can, and then you've got the other side of it, which is you're heading towards something. And most people stay in that running away from it phase, whether it's financial insecurity, instability, mentally or physically, or just whatever's like pulling them back, maybe trauma or whatever mindset related stuff. But once you fulfill your tick boxes per se of what you deem as success out of that realm, you then work towards that purpose driven forwards like momentum. And I think that we're in a bit of an industry as well that isn't spoke about too much because it sounds a bit wanky, is that, like you said, is that, you know, sometimes you get those messages and they don't mean the way that they used to hit. They don't hit the way that they used to. And unfortunately, it's not because you don't care less about the client that's making great results. It's just that you've had so many of them that you're desensitized to it. It's like stepping on the scale every day, and the scale weight stays the same every single day, or it goes up and down and it's fine. Or it's like, I don't know if you've ever heard of compassion fatigue, where basically you just can't feel the same way that you felt 6 months ago because you've been dealing with lots of different people. Yeah. And when you, as you know, when, let's say, for example, if you're going to speak to 15 people, 20 people a day, by that 15th or 20 person, whether they've had an amazing week or a bad week, you're still kind of emotionally drained.
So, yeah, I mean, this is something that I've actively like desensitized myself to. Like, I actively stop myself getting excited when a client sends me about one of these people, like new bests, or like they're, you know, they've achieved their goal. And it's not a case of like I'm trying to not make it exciting. Like, it's just that when you do deal with so many people on a weekly basis, that if you're constantly at the mercy of their emotional state, then you're going to be all over the place, and you need to protect yourself first with that. And that's, you know, one of our coaches that we're bringing on just now is new to the industry, and that is a new thing for her. So I'm like, right now, your limiting factor right now is you're still emotionally attached to your client results, which you definitely should be invested in the results, but not emotionally attached to it, because you can't control that person's actions. You can only help guide them. And if you're going to be constantly linked to it, you're going to be all over the place all week. So it's like, right, okay, how do we desensitize ourselves to that, and then start to actually just be objective over the course of the week as a coach, because essentially that's where you're at your best. You don't want to be helping somebody being pissed off from another client going into this client, or equally you don't want to be overly excited from a previous client going into this one who maybe needs a firmer hand from you, and you're being a bit softer because you're excited. So it's a fun thing to run through, but it's definitely in the first couple of years I got maybe a bit overexcited about clients that were doing well, and maybe a bit too emotionally attached to clients that weren't getting the same level of buy-in as what you'd like.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think for me, neutrality is key, but I mean, I'm still working my way through that, and I've still got that ingrained thing where I look at people's scale weight and it's gone down, and I'm like, yes, and like
Yeah, 100%.
every single time that comes about. But over time, I've become less affected by people's bad weeks, or like they've had a very, very great week and they're like, oh my god, thank you so much. The highs don't get as high, but the lows don't get as low. And if we know anything from going to Ibiza, is that the higher the highs, the lower the lows, right? So like you have to all take that with a pinch of salt, because whilst you do get those highs and you live exactly on that person, I remember the first photo shoot that I ever did with a client, and I was buzzing for weeks after it, and high is so high. But then you can get knocked off a perch really easily if you're going super, super high, but also that will drive you to be super, super low. So having those.
Yeah, I think is as well, like you start chasing that, you start trying to chase those wins, so to speak. And then, like I remember to use the same example, the first photo shoot that I went to, where a client like seen the first photo of himself and didn't actually believe it was him, and like just seeing that visual change in the person's like mindset, like right then in there in that moment, you're like, that person now believes something different about themselves, and that's fucking awesome. But equally, that's not going to happen on a like average Tuesday morning, you know what I mean? Like, whereas like that's what you can't base your job satisfaction around, you know what I mean? It's like, actually, you just need to keep turning up, showing up, and giving the best that you can, rather than just like trying to search for these highs. And a lot of it is going to be sifting through the lows, because you're helping people get through positions where they're maybe not comfortable with themselves. So it's not all going to be wins on a daily basis, you know what I mean? So it's,
No,
as you said, sometimes it's running away from a place of pain.
I think actually one of the most important things about anyone's journey as a client is that the great wins, the great weeks are fantastic. We can't knock them down too much, but in reality, like the more shitter weeks that you have, the more times you fail, the more times you have this inherent element of like, oh shit, I need to get challenged and get better. It does lead to greater levels of then success further down the line, because you have to fail in order to then learn something about yourself, to then create challenge, to then move forwards. So like, as much as those higher weeks are great, and like we get lower in the lower weeks sometimes, but actually us getting lower in the lower weeks is probably defeating the purpose of coaching, because the element of like, because we're relying on the result or the success, and maybe those pitches are then going to fuel the next 10 clients, and maybe we then grow as a business if we get those results, and then it becomes all impinging on the result. But actually, the process of your Monday to Friday as a coach, it should be about actually getting not excited, but looking forward to the challenges of trying to help people find their own solutions. And that's a mindset shift when you're heavily dependent or reliant on the result of the client, because it's not controllable.
You hit the nail on the head there. That's even within my own role within the business now. Like, for Recomp to grow, we need to start like impacting more lives, right? That is in a nutshell. If we start helping more people, therefore, as a company, we will grow. But actually, I can't guarantee that more people are going to come chapping at our door. So I'm like, right, well, what can I do on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, that gets more people showing up and asking to work with us, and that's actually where I'm putting my focus, is on the tasks that I can impact, I suppose, which relates right back to what a client can do. They can't control what happens on the scale. They can't control 100% what their tape measure is going to say, what the photos are going to look like, but they can control what they do on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, and then the accumulation of that over the course of days, weeks, months, that's what actually does control the result of what they're looking for. And it's the same, like, it takes that objective mindset to actually look at what you need to do and then take a step back and go, right, okay, well, what do I need to do? Because for me, it's awesome to want to post something like a before and after on Instagram because it gets the highest engagement. But in actual fact, I'm like, well, is that what I needed to do right now to grow the business, to be able to create more stability for our coaches, to be able to impact our clients a little bit more? Probably not. So it might be one element of it, and that's when we actually start going, right, okay, well, what can I impact in terms of the daily basis to make sure that we take a step in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. It's like a cog in a wheel, but it's there's multiple cogs in that wheel. And the best thing I actually did recently, off tangent, but the best thing I did to get a level of fulfillment out of my day was every night, the night before, I'd write out the major tasks of the day and just scribing them off in pen has been a winner for me. Like the sense of achievement that you get, but then it desires you to look at the process. So now I won't go a day without looking at my process of the day, and like every day I'm like ticking off three, 4, 5 different things that are actually contributing to the week. And beforehand, because I was just doing check-ins and working for a different company, I'd just go in that perpetual cycle of this is the only thing that I was doing, or this is the only thing that I was made for. And therefore you then lose your sense of identity, and you lose a sense of purpose and process, because you'll always be desiring yourself on a result as opposed to the day-to-day inner workings. And I feel like even if you take a step back and not even look at it from a business perspective, or person that's running their own business, is that most Gen Pop or individuals that work for a corporate company will have their day designed for them and the purpose of their day done or dusted. But there's no level of, like, for one of a better term, no autonomy in their level of like process. So when they come to doing their day-to-day stuff, it's always been dictated by them as opposed to what they're going to get, from themselves. They've not designed it. So
that was actually one of the hardest things when I when I transitioned to online, was like, you think you're your own boss when you're doing one-to-one on the gym floor, but you're actually dictated by your schedule that's based around what your clients can do as well. Whereas when you're online, you have to have like full control of your entire day, and it's entirely self-imposed, which is a challenge. It's like if you've not got a 9-to-5 based laid out for you, like, you don't need to work 9-to-5. Like, you can choose those hours, which that sounds like freedom, but in actual fact, it's a bit of a trap unless you actually set that yourself. And the skill of being able to hold yourself accountable to that is something that most people take for granted until they've actually given the opportunity to have freedom.
And it's a trap.
But yeah,
it's a trap as well. Having tried,
fucking massive trap, mate.
Having tried multiple different schedules to try and get the best out of the 24 hours, what I can say is that even if you think you're in control, you're determined by your environment anyway. So like, if you get a girlfriend that is in the corporate environment who works a 9-to-5, you're going to work 9-to-5 because at 6 p.m. she's going to want you to kind of sit down and watch Netflix together. You can't go and work at 6 to 11 because then you feel guilty for not seeing them. And then vice versa like that. It's like you end up being a product of the people you're around. And if, like, let's say if you're working in a villa in Bali with 3 other online coaches that are doing exactly the same, you guys can match up your schedule absolutely fine to whatever you've got going, and that's great. But in reality, if you're in a corporate world, or you're a CEO of a business, that your own business, and your wife or your husband is corporate or even working like half days, you're dictated by them. So it's a trap. Like, the ultimate flexibility is not flexibility. You ultimately have to have a choice that your environment is king.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah. And I suppose that comes down to, like, even a small thing that we were touching on this morning before we got into this, was just talking about like the underpinning factors of what we do within our own companies in week 1 and 2 is like create structure for clients. As much as it looks like we're giving them a meal plan and a training plan, it's not. Like, we're creating the structure to make sure that we can assess what works for them and what doesn't, and then refine that structure to make sure that they've got a repeatable pattern that they can say, right, well, this is going to at least let me take one step forward and then the next step forward, and we're going to have to refine that. And that might look like you change on the surface, it might look like you change the meal frequency or what's included in the meals, but what you're actually looking at from a coach is like, what part of that didn't work, and it's the same with when it comes to us, or when it comes to your day. It's like, right, well, actually, let's not start from a blank canvas and try and design your day up from an empty whiteboard. It's like, right, we'll figure out what your environment allows, and then start to try and like match it to the best you can. Because I was very much the same. Like, again, on the gym floor, I just worked every hour. But when it came to online, I was like, right, okay, well, actually, I don't want to be working in the evening when my partner comes home from work. You know what I mean? I'm like, I actually want to be able to spend some time with her rather than answering check-ins at 9 in the evening. So yeah, I suppose that freedom wasn't quite as free as what it is or what it looks like.
Yeah, and the element of like starting your day from a whiteboard or zero canvas doesn't impact that you've got priorities. Like, everyone has priorities and they're at different levels. So actually going and just being honest with those higher level priorities and making them a priority first is going to be key. But then once you've done that, then you can then input all the rest of the stuff, like the nutrition, the training, the lifestyle stuff, because that's when you can start making those changes. But until you actually recognize that you've got priorities and these people in your life, these events in your life are actually important, you can then start making the adjustments to make a lifestyle or a framework that will work for you, not in the ideal world. Because once you work off a blank canvas, off a whiteboard, you're working in an ideal world, but no one works in an ideal world. Everyone works in, they've got priorities, they've got values, and they've got the environments that they need to service. And once you do those things and you look at it from a priority standpoint, a values perspective, then you look at what else you can fit in. That determines what you can actually do from a physical change perspective, because you've only got a certain amount of hours to do steps. And if you start from a whiteboard with nothing on, you'll be like, yeah, I can do 15,000 steps, or I can do this amount of cardio, or I can do this amount of food intake. And then when you then try and implement something off a non-priority based, value based system, you're fucked, because you're working in the ideal as opposed to the practical.
Yeah, I mean, that's massive, and that's pretty much the shift that I've seen in my own role within the company right now. Is like my priorities have shifted in terms of what's my biggest task of this week. And my biggest task this week is pretty much making sure that my coaches are upskilling every single week and are not struggling with any form of like coach client relationship or communication. It's like, right, okay, how can we get better as a company to serve the rest of my coaches, not just my own check-ins? Because actual fact, like, now our reach is outgrowing me, and it's outgrowing my direct contact with just my clients. I'm like, I need to actually have a step back and see how the whole company is functioning, and not just my email inbox. It's like, right, okay, well, the number one priority this now is to make sure that we've got clear communication as a team, to make sure that there's not repeatable things that as a team we're missing, and things that holes that we could plug if we were communicating a little bit better. So number one priority comes down to actually just making sure that there's an infrastructure for us, one, to communicate, and two, for us to progress as a team, rather than, I'm getting better because I'm seeing certain problems in my check-ins and that's not translating to other coaches within our company, or the opposite. They're seeing certain problems in their check-ins and it's not helping the rest of the coaches. So it's been interesting to actually start to change those priorities, because obviously I'm not starting from a blank whiteboard or whatever we want to call it, but the priority list has changed in terms of the impact that I can have within the company, and it's interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's the thing about that, when the priorities list do change, it really there's one part of like your life where you're able to understand the priority values and system. Like, that's one task within itself, and that requires lots of awareness and mindfulness and understanding about where your cards are at this moment in time, like in the deck of 52. But then on the other side of it is like, once you've found out what your priorities are, you have to then find out when they shift, and then when they do, and how you act when those change at the same time. And that flip between the two, when people think, oh yeah, I've got this, my priorities are like this, and I'm guilty of this. I've flipped from traveling the world to now having a stable house and a dog, and I've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, understanding my values and priorities. And I'm like, holy shit, I didn't adapt. And as I went through the process, I thought I was going in the right direction because I had this priorities and values section, but I didn't check in with myself to realize that actually, was this what I wanted? Was these the priorities? Were these the values? Were these the things that I wanted? And as your business is changing, it's very similar. Like, as you go through, your values, your priorities, and your impact will change as you head on that journey. And it's the autocorrect as you go throughout the process that will lead to that flip flop, because priorities will change. Your impact to 100 will be different to how you act with one check-in. Like your ability to help James and Jade with their check-ins will then impact more people than you do in your own check-ins.
And I think that's the biggest thing is kind of realizing that is that where your biggest impact, like where your energy and focus has to be on what's going to create the biggest impact. And sometimes that can be super small things like refining your check-in flow for as a company, or your standard like operating procedure for general setups for people coming in. And other times it literally can be like you've reinvented the wheel for within your own business and how you structure the entire business's week, you know. But I think what you said there about actually your priorities changing, and then you having to be self-aware enough to understand that that's when they're changing or when they need to change and you've not done it yet, is a big thing. Because that was one of the conversations that I had with Adam, was when I hit capacity. We hit it a lot faster than expected, which was a nice compliment. But then the conversation was like, right, well, what do I do? Do I want to just stay here and enjoy life where I'm at, or do I start putting things in place to scale? Do I want the headache of having staff, or do I want the enjoyment of being able to scale to the point where I can start to impact a lot more lives, or do I just stay where I'm at? You know, and it's like they have to be conscious choices. So even right now, like we're in the process of looking for another coach. I'm like, that was a conscious decision, and a conscious decision that I actually spoke to my team about as well. And it's like, right, well, do we want to grow this even further? Because right now it's like, you know, it's a phrase that I've stole from you a few times, but it's like right now we're a band of brothers. Like it is very much close knit. Like we're all in a WhatsApp group where there's enough of us, again, to steal yours, there's enough of us to share the same pizza. You know, like it is very much a close knit community with the recomp coaches, that if we were to grow to a team of 20, that's not going to be quite as close knit. It couldn't be. And, you know, it's like, do we want that? Probably not. You know, so there is going to be, by its nature, a limit on how big we can scale this, because we don't really want to scale it any bigger, you know. So it's like, right, okay, well, now my priorities are here. They're going to shift when we're a team of 5 or a team of 6 or whatever that is. But I don't want to ever make that just an autonomous decision. Like it's not just we're just going to that position. It needs to be conscious, right? Okay, every play that we make has to be, is this going to add to us in terms of our life and in terms of our clients' life? And that's a hard thing to get right, because there's no fucking way you can get it right the entire time. Like I'm definitely in a similar boat to you. Like I always pretty much swing the pendulum too far the other way and figure out, you know, touch the hob, make the mistake, and then touch the other hob, make the other mistake, and then realize I should probably just be in the middle.
Good old zigzag, we call it.
Yeah,
you go forwards, but you end up touching each side as you go forwards.
The drunken stoat. That's what that is.
Literally. What you said then about you have to make it something that you're choice dependent going forwards, and I think if we look at food, nutrition, back even to the fitness podcast, but it's like anything that relates back to you're going in a specific direction, and if in relationships, you go forwards in a relationship or whatnot, but if you're passive and not autonomous in like your values, your priorities, where you're aligning to, you almost get carried away by maybe what your parents did or the environment that you were before, or your expectations of what you would deem as a great relationship, as opposed to what you want for you. And therefore, when you can go and you can happily move in a direction without thinking that you're doing anything wrong or anything that's off course, but then you're just working on autopilot. Whereas the key fundamental what we're speaking about and just kind of reiterating is that you have to autocorrect as you go, because your priorities and values and all those areas will change as you grow as an individual, as your capacity demands, as your individual needs for a business change also. So by having them constantly reaffirmed and changed, that's going to lead to different priorities, different value sets, different setups of a day-to-day basis, and different challenges.
Massively. And I think that's the thing. It's like, if you need to be aware of what those values and those kind of principles of what you want actually are, because as you said, they will change. To use a good example of this, as like one of my clients last year was in a very, very unhealthy position, to the point where the kind of spark for him to work with me was that basically the GP told him that he wasn't going to live to see his kids grow up if he doesn't change his habits. That's quite a big incentive to make some sort of change. So he was on quite a lot of metformin for diabetes. And that was the spark that got him to work with a coach in the first place. We got into a position where his body fat levels, his nutrition habits, everything were aligned to the point where he didn't need to take any metformin anymore. So he was in a healthy position. But throughout that process, he thought that he wanted to do a photo shoot. And it was like, I want to do this. But the second he got the all clear in terms of not having to take any more medication, it was like a different client. And the reality is, he didn't actually want to do a photo shoot. He just got carried away with the environment of seeing some of our other clients do photo shoots and seeing that was like, quote unquote, the pinnacle of fitness. And we were like, well, no, actually, you came to us to get to the position where you were going to be healthy enough to walk your kid down the aisle. You've achieved that. So this is why now your actions and habits aren't aligning with what you say is your goal, because your goal isn't actually your fucking goal. Like, your goal was to get healthy enough. And I think that's really where having that check with yourself and what you value and what you need to be doing on a weekly basis has to be a conscious choice. And most people don't actually know what that conscious choice is in the first place, and it's a hard thing to find, isn't it? So.
Yeah, 100%. And I think actually the majority of that decision that comes where you're like, I'm heading towards this goal, I'm running away. It's like running away from the situation again. It's like, as people near that mid ground of deciding that, wow, I've come away from that shit place, but then they're in that mid ground of like, okay, I'm kind of achieving what I'm achieving, and I'm fine with that. But I also need that next attachment. I need what that next thing is. So then that next thing becomes potentially the product of their environment again, right? Because your environment probably created the shit in the first place. And therefore you're moving out of that environment because you realize that was a negative place to be because you're running away from it. You come to this new place and then you're like, okay, this is cool here. I've kind of achieved the kind of goals, or I'm near enough at my goal. It's normally that, in quote unquote, self-sabotage, 2 or 3 kilos away from where they wanted to get to. They had the goal at 80 kilos, or at 82 for about 2 or 3 months, because they haven't really got to that last bit because they're chasing something, but they're not chasing it enough. It isn't strong enough for them to like kind of continue to sacrifice. So they try and then leverage a goal that may be not what they wanted in the bid to go and get that extra 2 kilos, that extra bit off, because they're struggling at the moment in time. But that, in having a goal that is not serving you or isn't actually what you want, only ends up in negative ramifications because it doesn't drive you, and therefore you think you fail or you're a failure because you keep having negative weeks, or you're not having weeks where you're like, this isn't working for me, I don't have the drive that I used to have. And it's just at that point in time, that's the point where you reevaluate values, priorities, and actually what it is that you started with and where you are now. It's like that gratification element where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to be grateful for what I've come and where I've gone, but where am I heading? And once you align and get to that point where you're like, actually, I came here for X, have I got that? And it's like, have you got the feeling that you wanted when you started? The answer is yes or no. And it doesn't matter what your body looks like. It doesn't matter if you've got a little bit of body fat that jiggles. Who gives a fuck? Like, did you get that feeling that you were after? If the answer is yes, you've completed your diet, move on with life. If you haven't, and you've still not got that feeling that you came in and you wanted to be confident, or you came in and you wanted to be not fucked, or you wanted to be like healthier, if you've got the feeling of healthy because of what you're doing right now, don't continue going downwards, because that's just called the diet culture, which is, if you go further down, it gets better. It fucking doesn't. Anything past
it does not.
10 to 12% becomes dog shit. And like, the lower you go, the more you look at Instagram models, the more you look at people that are quote unquote living their best life, taking a picture with their six pack and veins on their abs. If they have that all year round, they've got an eating disorder, or that they really, really got a negative issue with food, or they're genetic freaks, all three of them probably all in one go for the most people. And it was really difficult to stay down there, and your value has to be in your physical worth. But for someone that's a gen pop, or someone that has kids, priorities, other things that aren't just like eating chicken and veggies and then having abs and taking pictures, you will find the disconnect between what you're able to do versus what they seem to be able to do. And the reason why that they don't feel that way is because they're fucked and you're all right. You just need to recognize that they're fucked, or like they're at a different level, completely different spectrum to you are, and you're not in the same game as they are. They're playing Scrabble, you're playing Monopoly.
Yeah, that's massive. I'm definitely taking that. That's a one-liner that I'm taking from this podcast. Yeah, I mean, the way that we describe it is like, we've got certain phases that you need to go through. Typically, towards the end of the diet phase is where we want you feeling at your kind of most confident with it, most confident within your own physique. But it's not a position or a trajectory you want to hold. You don't want to keep going further. So when we map out the reverse diet, it's like, right, well, what we want to do is actually figure out what your highest return on investment physique is. So what allows you to, go out, have a meal with your partner, what allows you to have a couple of drinks that week, what allows you to still feel confident in your own skin. All of these combined, that's where you want to be staying in terms of your physique. And sometimes that is where you actually peak within your diet. And for other people, it's like, they take it a little bit further, maybe do a photo shoot. But almost every client that I've ever had that gets into photo shoot condition, that's not the highest return on investment physique. That's not where they want to stay. Because getting in photo shoot condition for most people requires a level of sacrifice that doesn't align with a sustainable lifestyle, or actually an enjoyable lifestyle for most people long term. It's a fucking awesome achievement because typically it will help people change their mindset in of what they could achieve, or in and around how they feel that they look, how they view themselves, and that's a great thing to change for somebody. But they need to understand that you don't want to hold on to a photo shoot condition because it's not fucking enjoyable. Like for most guys, like your dick doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like it's not a great position to be in, isn't it? Oh yeah, you looked fucking great on a beach, mate, but you couldn't pull anybody because you can't take them home.
Yeah.
Or equally, like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, cool. You've got amazing abs. You're single digit body fat, but you're scared to go out and have a meal. Like, that's not a good position to be in. So we actually want to make sure that you get that throughout that transition. You know where you want to stay, what gives you the highest reward for efforts in terms of confidence and actually enjoyment.
And if you want to do a photo shoot and you want to do those things, you almost need to make a decision on doing the photo shoot outside of what the expectations you see as other people doing photo shoots. So like if you see that people do photo shoots and you see that they've got this blissful set of abs in their little Speedos, you need to also forget that that is the 1%, and that just to buy it. And I've been guilty of this myself. When I take clients there, I always think of clients that I need to get them as lean as possible for this photo shoot. And that's almost dictonomous thinking within itself, because it's like, well, what was the photo shoot there for in the first place? The photo shoot for everybody, regardless of body fat percentage, is there to give you and capture a moment where you've created change from where you were before to where you are now, to see yourself in that picture where you don't see yourself in the mirror every single day. You don't see yourself in the same lighting that you ever done before. And you'll see yourself in a different way, to be able to change fundamentally who you think you are versus who you actually are, or who you want to be in the future. That's what a photo shoot is for, not for I wanted more abs, or I wanted to do this to show my mates. Fuck that. You won't get there, and you won't have any positive from it if you take it like that. And I'm guilty of this.
Well, any lasting positive.
Yeah.
That it's funny you say this, actually. That drops today. So I've just booked in 3 clients for a photo shoot for May with Ben Marks, our group shoot. And literally tonight at 6 p.m, I drop an email to all clients basically asking if anybody else wants to get involved in this one. And also we're lining up the following one after that. But the kind of sales pitch, so to speak, of what I'm actually sending out isn't about getting your abs out. It's not about getting, like, in the photos that we're putting up there are of people looking fantastic. Like they are lean. They are probably further than the average client takes it. And that's totally fine. But the message that's underneath it is it's not about that at all. Like, it's about setting a tangible date for you to reverse engineer, going harder and actually having a clear journey mapped out for you so that you can help change these values with it and change that, like, that perception of yourself. But again, that's just part of the journey, isn't it? It's like you need to understand how you come out the other side of it as well.
Yeah, and last one on this before we actually flip gears, because this has been fucking fantastic. I've got a couple of more questions for you, but I think also with that element is that in dieting, and it will always be the same. It can never change, because this is how humans view humans in yourself, is that you will never see the change fully within yourself. You'll always remind yourself of that person that you were. Like, even when I look in the mirror now, as much as I'm now, I don't know, 15, 20 kilos heavier than I was 5, 7 years ago, or whenever it was that I started, like 10 years ago when I trained, I still see the fat kid that was 82 kilos wearing an extra large t-shirt at 15. And it's not always the same. I don't always see that, but the feeling I feel when I see myself in the mirror is not the one that I've ever got when I make the change that I make. And you almost, because you're in the same environment, you're in that same position with brushing your teeth, with your boxers on, you got the same, not the same underwear, but you got the same Calvins, you got the same toothpaste, you're using Colgate every single time, you're looking yourself in the same mirror every single time, and then you're seeing yourself in the same light every single time. That doesn't reflect the change that you're making. Our eyes are so beautifully made that you will adjust to that shape very, very easily, and you may not see change. Like, for most people, there's a quote on it, but I'm not going to butcher it because it's a shit quote anyway. But like, if you get 10 kilos off, you'll see visual change within yourself. If you get 2 to 3 kilos off, you won't see that much change, but other people will see it. And like, the more you can get off, the more you're going to see it. But what you don't want to do is think more is better. It's just seeing yourself in a different light and a different scenario will often be a very good, helpful marker for you to kind of change how you think about yourself. Because when you go back to brushing your teeth and your bills with Colgate, is that you need to be able to be grateful for the fact that you've made change, but you won't if you don't see yourself in this new light or person that you are.
Yeah, mate, I think that's half of why it's so powerful to show, like, and why I get clients to send photos weekly, is because the vast majority of clients that maybe think they've had a tough week or a tough month and maybe not seen as much progress as what they would like, you know yourself, like, the absolute scale change at the end of a diet is smaller than it is at the start of a diet. So the feedback loop or the gratification that you get from the scale towards the end of a diet is so much smaller than it is towards the start of a diet.
Yeah,
it's much less exciting. But actually, when you look at and you show them the photos of, when they've had a rough week or a rough 2 weeks, and you show them how far they've actually came, almost always the response is, "Holy fuck! Like, I did not realize it was as much as that," because you're comparing the progress on that Wednesday to the progress on like 2 days before on the Monday. You know what I mean? You're like, actually, you've just stacked 12, 13, 14 weeks worth of progress up on top of each other. You didn't start on Monday there, mate. Like, you started fucking 12 Mondays ago. So sometimes you just need to actually take a little look back to see how far you've came with that. But it is very, very difficult to appreciate your own progress.
Yeah, 100%. Right, so flipping gears now. So I've got one larger question. Just very simply, is that I first ever time I knew about you was not how great you are as a lad or on the booze or any type of like banter that you've got or whatever like that. But I found out about you through just how strong you were from deadlifting perspective when we were used to work together back in the day. And that used to be like your calling card for what you did every, like, squatting, deadlifting, benching, whatever it was. I want to ask you, like, for clients that are currently like struggling for, let's not take COVID for example, but we see that a lot of people don't have target or performance related goals, and that is a large reason why a lot of them don't train for 2 years plus, and that doesn't keep them coming back into the gym. Whereas we know that actually performance related lifting and the desire to do so will be a large impending factor on whether they stay in shape long term and they have goals that they can achieve time and time again. Like, where did your drive come from for getting strong? And if so, or when you know about it, how do you try and promote that within your own clients so that they kind of desire that too?
That's a big question. So I suppose my own history is the fact that I used to run an Olympic lifting club at uni. Got a lot of people fairly strong with that. When I went to commercial training, like PTing in a commercial gym, they didn't have the same facilities back then. As the average budget gym was shit back then. But then I kind of transitioned to powerlifting just as a general sport. So almost all of my physique was built through just chasing performance related goals. It wasn't, I was aware that I wanted to get a little bit bigger, but it wasn't the main focus. The main focus was, to get a bigger bench, bigger squat, bigger deadlift, like all of these things. And by default, I grew, But I suppose if I look at if we look at what you can actually do to change a rig, like you can get more or less body fat, or you can get more or less muscle. These are the only two main variables. Like, you're not going to change your skeleton. Like, you know, it's not what we're here to do. So if we're looking at these factors now, we know that the body fat side of things is pretty much very, very, like, not easy, but simply put, it's energy balance, isn't it? It's the regulation of that over a long enough period of time to see a change. That's not what impacts muscle mass. So that has to be stimulated and kind of brought on by increases in strength. So it's the only fitness quality that actually has any impact in how much muscle you've got on your frame. So you can be more flexible, you can have better endurance, you can have more mobility, and they won't make any semblance of a difference. Like, technically, mobility will have a bit of a difference if it unlocks more range that you can get stronger in, but it's not a direct impact. Like, the only thing that's going to impact how much muscle you've got on your frame is how strong you actually are. And so, which is great for us, because if we are trying to change the way somebody looks, we can objectify how strong they are. So therefore, we can actually map out a strategy to change the way that you look. And then there's also the fact that you can get stronger in specific areas. So therefore, you can really fine tune how your physique looks by using the right exercises that fine tune that. So I suppose the kind of main thing is like, if you look at how you want to look, there is going to be genetic determinants for that. You know, like, your insertions are different from mine, or your bone structure is different from mine. But the one thing that we can actually impact is how much stronger we get you in a specific area and how much muscle we put on that area. So I built most of my physique through squat, bench, and deadlift. Now, these aren't optimal for most people. But it's, you know, they're not even fucking optimal for me. The amount of injuries I've got from that's a joke. But they, you know, in the process of getting stronger for these, it allowed me to build enough muscle on my frame that I'm actually very happy with how my frame looks, you know. And that's something that we now apply to our clients, not necessarily with those movements, but it's right, okay, we need to get objectively stronger in these movements if you are trying to get XYZ change within your physique. Does that answer the question as to why we look at strength as a factor, or because there's quite a big amount that we can go into with this?
No, that's perfect. That's just enough to know, for people to know why it's important. So let's say,
yeah, I mean,
someone's like saying that I don't give a fuck about my lifts, and why is that important for the long term? And why do I have to go and do that? Why can't I just go to the gym and do the same every single week? Like, why can't I go and do that and still why is that?
Yeah, I mean, like, the easiest way to describe that is, like, literally, like, the whole purpose of a muscle is to create movement. So, like, and to create movement, it needs to create force, and therefore, like, a bigger muscle is better at creating more force. So therefore, if you challenge its ability to create more force, you make it bigger. And that's the general stimulus, or the general reason behind this, the why it grows when you put more weight on the bar, because you're challenging its ability to create more force. So yeah, you might not give a fuck about getting stronger, but if you give a fuck about changing the way you look from a lean mass point of view, from a muscle point of view, then you have to, by default, respect the approach of it. It's the same as, like, you might not care about calories, but if you care about dropping your body fat, you're going to manage them enough, you know. And it's the exact same when it comes to getting stronger. It's like, you might not be attached to being able to bench 100, 140, whatever it is, but if you're attached to having a bigger chest, you will start to respect the process, or at least be invested enough in ticking off the boxes to get that, because that's what's going to get you ultimately your end goal.
What if you're a mid-30s, got 2 kids, don't give a shit about my glutes or my shoulders or whatever muscle group? Like, why is getting stronger going to lead to me not yo-yoing and not being not being another failed diet?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the harder sell, really, isn't it? Because for most people who don't necessarily, you know, Instagram's made our job a lot easier in selling muscle gain phases, because it's, you know, quote unquote, more desirable now, isn't it? It's more mainstream. I remember, like, 10 years ago, trying to tell a girl that we were going to build her glutes. She was like, not a chance. You know, I'm quite happy looking slim.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
You don't want muscles, you want a skeleton.
Pretty much. And but I mean, I suppose it really depends on, again, going back to what you value. So for most people, if it's not that, if it's not about changing your physique any further, we typically just relate it back to what it will improve in terms of your own quality of life. So it could be the fact that actually you find daily tasks a lot easier. It could be the fact that actually it flips your mindset away from chasing a lower number on the scale forever. Like actually you'll see, improvements within the same body weight for the rest of your life if you just continually getting stronger. It could be the fact that actually improving training performance, albeit to a small extent, will actually allow you to eat more food. So there's loads of different connections that you can make to within their lifestyle. And I suppose that the skill of a coach really comes down to identifying what that client values in the first place, and then starting to relate it. Because we know that getting somebody stronger over a long period of time isn't just limited to improvements in muscle gain. It's got a lot more improvements and a lot more benefits to it. But it's really linking it back to what that is. A completely odd example of this one was one of my clients. We're going back like 8 or 9 years ago now. Mary, when she came to me to start with, she literally couldn't do a split squat on the spot. She was so like her level of stability was and mobility was so limited that she pretty much hadn't taken the stairs in her apartment. And to give context to how intense the sessions were, I taught her how to text in between her rest periods. Like she was in her 60s, right? And she texted me one day basically telling me she could take the shopping in herself for the first time in like well over 10 years. And I was like, right, well, it's not about putting 10 kilos in your bench press, is it? Like it's got a lot more value to it. And that the thing is, from the outside as a client, you can understand why they don't see that, because that's not what's sold, but yeah, it goes a lot further than just putting, a couple of inches on your glutes.
Yeah, because that is fantastic. But it's the same as the photo shoot thing as well. It's like more is not always better, or more fat loss is always better, or more muscle is not always better. Like it's always, you're always desiring those elements to kind of solve a problem somewhere, which is fine. But you'll have to pick how much is the beauty of anything that we have in today's society is that you have a choice of how much you choose as enough. What is enough? And then that means you get what you kind of deserve from that process, as opposed to like overcompensating and going too far. But for the most part, like the mid-30s female, like why you need to train is exactly what Kevin said. That's like, there's some things in the later down the line that you'll value from training and resistance training, but you also need that goal outside of your body, outside of your scale weight, that you're going to work towards, because the scale weight, which is for most people has been the bane of their existence, and the thing that why they wake up in the morning in the mood, or why they've had a quote unquote good day, is because they've stepped on a scale and 0.5 has come off. You can't be dictated by those fluctuations for the rest of your life, because they don't fucking matter. But in order to take away that focus, you also have to replace it with something new and something that's a different focus. And that's why resistance training and then trying to progress your performance lifts is then becoming the new way to ensure that the game is forever.
The progress game's still there, isn't it? The progress game's still there. So you're still incrementally increasing your progress, but it's just in a different field now. And I think that's the biggest thing that you mentioned. Like, how would you sell that to somebody that would ask why they can't just turn up to the gym every day and like just go and exercise rather than try to get stronger? And I think like the biggest take home with that is like, again, we relate a lot of these back to diet analogies because people can understand them a lot better, but it's that you can't just eat clean. Like, that's not enough to get results from a fat loss point of view. Typically you have, whether you do it calorie counting or whether you do it from a meal plan, but you have your calories calculated through some means to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. And it's the same when it comes to training. Like, you won't see any difference if you're literally just going in and either doing the same thing or just winging it, like, and working, like you're guessing then. Whereas if you've got some sort of set structure with your training and then a progression method built into it, you're going to see change because it's calculated. And then having a clear picture in terms of where you're trying to take things, i.e. a tangible strength goal, you can start to reverse engineer that progression method to where you are just now, and then link the two dots together. And then that means that when you go into a Monday session and it's upper body X, Y, Z, you've got a result or a process that you're trying to follow to get a result, and it means that the whole thing globally is much easier to buy into what you're doing on a daily basis, because you can see where it's taking you, and that's much. We find that that's much more rewarding, and then 5-6 months down the line, people start talking about numbers, they start talking about performance increases, they start talking about like new bests within the gym a lot, like, and even within our app, like it flashes up and tells them that they've hit a new personal best every time it does, because it's like we want that feedback loop of taking them away from just looking at the scale.
No, that's brilliant, and that really answers the question really well. And that's what you have to do. You have to make it obvious at the beginning as well, with the utilization of apps and progress and graphs and stuff like that, so that people can see, wow, they're making progress, right? But well, that's really the end of the episode. That was a really good chat. I really enjoyed that. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much for having me on, mate.
No worries. I don't know really what we spoke about, but it sounded great.
Yeah, same. I was going to say, just absolute tangent queens.
Don't care about anyone else. That was fantastic for me, and always a good chat. So thank you very much. Where can people find you?
Recomp_online on Instagram, easiest way.
Perfect. And you'll probably see me. I'm tagged in some of his stories, and he's tagged in mine anyway. So we've been seeing a lot of each other very soon. So that'd be great. So apart from that, guys,
to Dubai, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for listening. And this was the first episode of us kind of branching out and talking shit to other people as opposed to talking shit to ourselves. So have a great day, and chat soon.